The Federal and Velevin Hypermarket jointly present the Thoothukudi Marathon 2024 to raise awareness on drug abuse. The event is co-presented by Edison Cardio Care Center, Tiruchendur, powered by L. Anand Jewelry and St. Mother Teresa Engineering College, Thoothukudi.
Hello and welcome to Culture Vibes, the Federal's special program in which we talk to writers and artists about their work. Joining me today is a very special guest, author Prayaag Akbar, who has come out with his second novel. It is a sparse and gripping novel called Mother India. Prayaag, welcome to the show and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Navid. It's lovely to see you again. Lovely to be in conversation with you again.
I want to begin with Prayaag with a question about nation as mother, and that is very central to this novel. And there are, of course, pitfalls to this, and there are dangers to this, and in the many ways that we have seen unfolding over the last few years, in fact, a decade. So, could you talk a little bit about what was it that sort of prompted you to write this novel rooted in such a familiar backdrop?
I did want to, this novel started different places. This one started at one place. It soon became a novel about social media. I became very interested in this world of YouTube content creation. I took a kind of very deep dive into all these various shows that come out, political commentary, whether it's right wing, left wing, whatever, centrist, and I actually became interested in it when I realized hardly anyone, especially young people, my characters are very young. Mayank and Nisha, the two central characters of the novel, they're very young, and I realized quite early into it that people that age are not watching television news. They're hardly reading newspapers. They're getting their news from the internet, and they're getting it not where someone from my generation or our generation would get it, which is Twitter and like things like places like that, or but literally YouTube, and Instagram also, and various other things. They have their own platforms. But when I realized this, and once I started watching the shows, I actually realized there's a lot of intelligent commentary and critique. Not only even coming from the right wing, coming from everyone. And it was very interesting to me. Some of the shows are very, very clever in how they go about their business and how they project the points they want to project. About, well, if it's a right wing show about say Muslim vote banks or whatever, however they construct the argument that they want to construct at that moment, whether it's about Aditya Nath's bulldozers or whether it's about whatever the argument is that they want to construct, it's a very clever, cogent, well-reasoned argument. There are very intelligent people behind these shows, and when they critique liberal hypocrisy, for me those were some of their biggest viewed videos. Are the ones where they take on well-established left-wing or centrist figures, intellectuals, and expose some aspect of hypocrisy or something that they've said in their argument that might be fallacious or something like that. And I became very interested. So once I realized that, these people, if I was writing about them, they should not be caricatures. They have to be very intelligent, reasonable, maybe not reasonable, but intelligent and reasoning people. Reasoning, like they reason things out very well. And a lot of them have engineering backgrounds, I think, and and so a lot of them are abroad. I noticed a lot of the best. Some of them are abroad, and so I became aware that this is something that this ecosystem is not is not something to be ridiculed, but something to be understood, because it's speaking to a massive proportion of India, massive population of the young in India, and even older people, and we need to see it and we need to understand it for what it is, and so that was like my starting point, and then the characters of Kashyap and who's the guy whose show it is, or Mayank was my starting point. He was really Mayank and Nisha. That was the connection that I knew. I didn't know how they were connected, but I knew I wanted to write about these two people who are kind of going through this new economy, new digital landscape, like making their way through it and trying to build the best lives for themselves, for their families. That for me, it's just something that every 21-year-old or every 22-year-old wants to do.
Right, a better life for themselves. But also, I think you mentioned somewhere in the acknowledgement section of the book, and two books that you talk about specifically, that is Sugata Bose's Nation as Mother and Other Visions of Indian Nationhood, and also Sumati Ramaswamy's The Goddess and the Nation. What sort of insight did you get from these two books? That sort of I mean, these are works of non-fiction, but
I think almost, so the Mother India image is very central to the novel. I'm very interested in that symbol. I'm interested in symbols of nationalism in general, but I'm very interested in that particular symbol of nationalism because it makes a plea to our own sense of, of our own kind of the allegiance we have to our mothers. It's kind of a double plea. It's like it's not only nationalism, it's not only the country, but it's mother and country. Who can say no to that, right? And so it's a very powerful image for everyone, for all of us. No one is unmoved by a plea to that, because we all kind of identify with protecting the mother, with taking care of the mother. And I don't like when, it kind of annoys me when symbols of nationalism are co-opted by a certain particular, political group or a certain political movement. In this case, I'm talking about how a lot of Hindutva groups have kind of claimed that image and taken it over. And, whereas it's a very important symbol of Indian nationalism from colonialism on. And that's what I learned from Sumati Ramaswamy's book in particular. I knew, of course, that it's a very old image, but I didn't know how historic it was, how important it was during the freedom struggle, during our struggle for independence, and how it was used by people of all religions. It was not a particularly Hindu symbol by any means. Once I realized that the symbol itself is, Sumati Ramaswamy's book actually has a lot to offer in terms of just understanding. It helped my understanding it. It helped me understand how the body and the kind of geographic body of our nation, as we think of, or the boundaries of our nation, and the image are linked in a way in our minds. It's so linked. The mother's head and the body and the legs and all of that, and it's kind of overlaid on our territory, and and some of these territories like Kashmir and the Northeast, and the boundaries are perhaps more fluid than we like to imagine. And so Sumati Ramaswamy's book is a very, very deep exploration of what the symbol is. It provides the lineage of the idea from Europe, Britannia and Germania, and their images of mother nation, and so and how it came to India. It's actually a European idea that gets transported along with the idea of nation. If you think about it, as with the idea of nation comes the idea of this kind of mother nation or nation mother, and I found it a very fascinating book. Sugata Bose's essay, the starting essay, the book is very good actually. But when I read that essay, which was many years ago, it just stayed with me because it's a very well-written, well-constructed essay, and it has the most beautiful analysis of Abanandranath Tagore's, the original painting of Bharat Mata or Banga Mata. The original painting was of Banga Mata, and he has a very, very interesting analysis of all the things that appear in the hands, and I just tried to work in this stuff because it was knowledge that I found fascinating, and so I tried to work in the text in subtle ways or obvious ways or whatever, and I hope people find it interesting.
Absolutely. So did you, in some way, also conceive this as a counterpoint to this appropriation of the idea of, of mother as a nation, and then how that is sort of used to against some citizens of the country in many devious ways?
Yeah, of course. So in the book, it's very much the book uses the symbol of the mother in various ways, but it's also, there's an activist who's put in jail for refusing to say Bharat Mata Ki Jai, which is a political reality of India today. Someone has been, uh, uh, there are people who've been put in jail for refusing to say. I mean, I don't know if it's for that specific reason, but I do remember this comment given by one of the JNU students, and this is for me, that image does not represent division and dissent or dissension, or
Yeah.
um, the mother is a welcoming and munificent. The mother is the giver of bounty. It's like the mother gives. She's not a taker. She's not a divider. She's a giver. And for me, the use of that image to divide and to sow discord and to create violence, whether it's political violence or social violence or whatever at the local level, is that's it's a horrible use of that image. And it's sad that I mean, these are political realities, but it's in some ways it's a way of reclaiming that, just saying that this is not. And actually, Sugata Bose's essay makes that point very well. That it can be used by people. I think he was, when that book came out, he was still in Parliament and he was in the TMC. I'm not sure if he was but he was standing up in Parliament when making these strong arguments against right-wing nationalism and against Hindutva, and it spread in Bengal. And around the same time, this essay was there. So he's not unaware of the power of the image, of its source, of how it comes from Bankim, and it comes from it has a long lineage, this idea, Bankim Chandra Chatterjee. And so that essay really explains it a lot. But we have to see. I mean, it was important to me to try and identify or establish certain facts about Mother India in my mind, about Bharat Mata. That's it.
Right. So Mayank is, of course, you mentioned about him, and there's Sushil, who also works with Vikram Kashyap. He is a 34-year-old guy who is some sort of celebrity who is running this. He is the host of this monologue called Kashyap Ji Ka Right Arm Fast, and and I wanted to understand if Mayank and Sushil, or people like him, in a way, because this person, Kashyap, is somebody who has his own agenda. He's ambitious. He has his eyes set on certain things. He has goals in life. Do you see people like Mayank and Sushil becoming pawns, in their agenda in a way, and as scaffoldings of their ambition, of the things that they want to achieve?
100%. Like, I mean, isn't that the way things work? Again, it's not uniform, a right-wing thing. It happens in media organizations. It happens in big media organizations. It happens in corporate offices. It happens all over the place. Like young, aspiring employees are often co-opted into larger battles, and over here it's clear what Kashyap wants. He wants as much celebrity as possible. He wants to promote his ideology and the way he sees the country, but he also wants to be, as big as the other YouTubers or whatever, like he wants to be as big as Captain Flight. In the book, there's a character called Captain Flight. He wants to be, he's ambitious for himself, and he doesn't mind who he has to step on to get there. And whether he has to step on figuratively like a community, or he has to step on his own employees, or that's not part of the things that, like, that he doesn't lose sleep at night about this, right? And my whole point was that I don't want to like absolve Mayank or Sushil or any of, like, I don't want to absolve people from the consequences of their own actions, or or what they're doing. And I don't think Mayank sees himself in that way by at the end. But like my point is that it's it's easier perhaps to become a pawn in something when you're young and you don't understand the world as well as a 35-year-old or a 40-year-old or whatever, 50-year-old. And when you're 22, you just you drift into jobs and you try and do your best, and you're dazzled and impressed by your boss and all that stuff, and like it happens all the time, and people sometimes take advantage of it, and it's I was trying to capture that dynamic in a small studio kind of small YouTube show, how that could play out.
Right, and the person that they are trying to target through this video happens to be someone who is seems to be modeled on Kanhaiya Kumar. Is it? I mean, even though you don't name him, but he comes from JNU, and there's a little bit of his background that's given early on in the book. So, would you? Yeah.
Yeah, he's a very inspirational figure for me. I was very upset. And I'm still obviously upset about what's happening over there. Umar Khalid, all of that, and Kanhaiya, and it's. I mean, so Kanhaiya Kumar was definitely someone who inspired. Who helped me understand what I was writing about. His plight, his Umar Khalid. Big time. These are people. The Bhima Koregaon, I find there's so many lapses in that, at least to my judgment. I don't know, I'm not an expert at all in constitution law or anything like that, but it just seems to me there've been big gaps, Anant Tentunde, all these guys have been imprisoned, and Gautam Labhlakha, all these people who've done so much amazing work over the years, and it stayed with me. I mean, it's something that, of course, is it's a reality, but it's a reality. But I just wanted to think about how we experience, how the power of the state in some places can be so overwhelming, and how it can take over lives and all of that. These are themes in literature. This has been a theme, and I'm not the first one. Anything, but it is it is something that for me has always bothered me. This even in the first novel, I think you could see that the state has this kind of overwhelming power sometimes, and when it's exercised in I mean, even in my time as a journalist, when I was I did a lot of reporting on the Delhi. There was the gas cylinder bombings and all of that, and in Delhi markets, and a lot of young Muslims were picked up, young Muslims, and basically released 10 years later. And for me, that was on the on basically reports, and that was when the Congress was in power. So these are not some things are the state, the state machinery gets so big and it's so powerful. I'm not it's not that I think with Kanhaiya and Bhima Koregaon and all these are all kind of political arrests of some sort or the other. But we need to. I mean, it's something that's been bothering me increasingly, and I did want to work that into the novel. And when it began to fit together, the pieces, the Kanhaiya character was actually a much older character. I was thinking of Varava Rao a lot. I was thinking of the poet. He started as a poet. It was before I reached JNU, and I had written a whole draft with a character much more closely inspired by Varava Rao, including he has these kind of interesting eyebrows with the kind of hairs. Including that detail, I think I'd reached that level of detail of copying from his life, and then I realized that wasn't doing it. I wasn't, it wasn't fitting into the larger themes of this novel, and the activists fitted in much better. JNU activists fitted in much better. Varava Rao was, kind of distant from Delhi, kind of distant from Hyderabad, and I managed to, to be able to do it here. Things click, ideas like pieces. You work on novels and you work on ideas, and then suddenly the jigsaw coming together. It's a bit like that, and then you can
as a journalist, as a fiction writer, how do you settle on a particular story to tell it through fiction, or or
So I think I've that's a really good question. It's a conundrum. I haven't actually I haven't written much journalism for a few years. Off and on, I write a piece, but I haven't done a long essay for at least for 3 4 years now. Maybe I wrote something for Eon last, but I mean the what I realized, I think you have to also like it's not like a strength as a writer, but more as like what are you interested in, and what am I interested in as a I'm like, am I interested in a kind of almost I read a lot of academic stuff, like I read a lot of academia. I work with I have colleagues who are I work at the university, so I have colleagues who are political scientists and anthropologists, and I come across it myself, and so it's not that I'm not interested in academic. I'm very interested in academic work actually, and I use a lot of nonfiction in my work. But like I have like what I mean, how could I contribute to our way of understanding? That's what you want as a writer, right? Something to write something new and something different, and your way of contributing to our collective understanding of the world we live in, or the society we live in, or whatever. And for me, this I think what I was drawn to was being able to show a character like that, like Mayank, who works in the show, in his humanity. I wanted to show him. I wanted to show that, but I wanted to understand that person first of all. And for me, like and this is possibly why it takes me so long to write a book. But like 5 6 years, because it took me a long time, or whatever, 4 years or whatever it took me, because I had a real tough time humanizing him in the right way. Making him more than a caricature of a YouTube troll, like a YouTube, someone who goes out and collects memes, anti-Muslim memes, anti-Dalit memes, and then gives it to his boss. Like, how do I convert that person into a thinking, feeling individual? That for me was the primary consideration, and I wanted to understand that person, because what I've really come to understand is, I think one of the launching points was 2019 and Modi's massive landslide victory, and it's like okay, so it's like one of the launching points might have been like, okay, this is my country, like these are my people. These are my people who have voted so overwhelmingly. And the Modi's first term wasn't great. There was demonetization. There was he didn't go hard on Hindutva. Like all that stuff happened in the second term, like the Ram Mandir and Kashmir and all the things. So in many ways, he hadn't satisfied his key demographic, and the swing voters were kind of like they could have been upset about demonetization or whatever, but he got this huge verdict, and I was like, okay, now it's time for me to like really try and understand what who these people are, and it was overwhelmingly young people who voted for him. And so I really wanted to understand why a young person who has the future ahead of them, and all economic opportunity, and wants more economic opportunity, and that was very much part of Modi's promises, and that was very much what I wanted to try and analyze and think about, and to try and understand someone who who's gone on that journey, in terms of where. In terms of how they feel about the country, how they feel about society, how they feel about their own selves. Mayank, for me, the strength of the character was like, he's very proud in a kind of positive way about his community, about where he's from, his place of origin, about his community, about his religion, about his nation. And for me, if I could depict that in a positive light, and not the destructive hyper nationalism that we see on the internet all the time, that destructive and divisive hyper nationalism, and instead of try and project a more positive nationalism, perhaps, in some ways. That was my way of making him, trying to make him more human and rounder character.
Right. Let me bring in Nisha here. I mean, this is again. I mean, like your previous novel, your first novel, Leila, which was the basis for this Netflix show by Deepa Mehta. And even though it's a very scary story in the sense that what is going to happen, the many walls that we create and how the things that divide us. But there's also at the heart of it is also a love story between the mother and the daughter, and I sense a similar sort of thread here, that you have you know uh, the relationship between Mayank and his mother, for instance. But the part about love story, about the Nisha and Mayank, and I wanted to ask you if that is something that also at the back of your mind.
The Nisha character was, I mean, I'm obviously very fond of her, but like, like I, 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 I've, I enjoyed writing those sections. I enjoyed writing those chapters a lot. It came somewhat easier than the Mayan chapters, I must admit. Um, Not really easier, but like at least, I found her situation
Yeah.
maybe a little more, her economic role in the, her role in the economy a little easier to think about. And she, uh, for a long time, I couldn't figure out her background actually, and then where she was from, and then once that clicked, and I do know that Uttarakhand belt a little. My wife is from there, and so like I used to keep going up there, to visit her family, and so it was once I figured that out, like this, because I know that world, and so it helped me make her home world real, like and that or like this material to the novel, like important to the novel, and I just for me the Nisha character was very very important. She's the starting point of the novel. She's the central character of the novel in many ways, and again, I didn't want it to be just this male gaze at her, like this boy or this man just looking at this woman and trying to, as you've read the novel, so like trying to do various things, but like, and fall in love with her from a distance kind of thing. But and instead of that, I thought, let me actually explore the character and see what I can do with this character and see what it would be like to be the recipient of that kind of attention, um, and and yeah, I mean, hopefully it worked out. I don't know. You'll have to tell me if.
Right. A little bit about technology. I mean, in both the novels, again, is a thread, in a sense that you talk about the possibilities and the judgments and the many ways that it sort of impact the lives of the characters in the novel. So, do you see that as more prominent in this novel than in the previous one, or is it something that you work on to sort of, or was it all organic that you're writing about contemporary India and you had to show it intersects our lives?
I mean, it was a conscious decision. I think actually during the pandemic, when I realized, I think we all got locked in, of course, and then we were suddenly going to social media so much more, like I mean, especially YouTube and things like that. I don't think I'd watched anything apart from like instruction videos on YouTube. Maybe I mean sports highlights, that kind of thing. I would just go to it occasionally, and then like sometime during the pandemic, I realized it's such a huge ecosystem of knowledge and information, and not just. I mean, it might have predated the pandemic actually, but like what I'm trying to say is that during the pandemic, I realized how much what a presence it has in our lives, and how much we are just all of us tuned in all the time to this kind of global conversation. Everyone wants to be involved. When you meet people who don't have this kind of digital privilege or digital access or whatever it is, they feel in that sense that lack. Like and uh, it's crucial. Everyone wants to be. Everyone in India, if does not want to be left out of you know of this new information kind of pipeline or whatever it is, world, or however you want to think of it. And I I I became increasingly aware, and I once I thought about it, and I understood that it is such an agent of empowerment and education. Like for me, if you notice, like Mayank and Nisha are kind of like throughout the course. It's a short novel, but throughout the course of the novel, they're like kind of learning small things about how to go through life. Like Mayank is always like on the internet learning, like rules for like interviews, or like job interviews, or how to be a better interviewer, or like anything, like how we Google stuff, and then we fall into these wiki holes, and we fall into and you get these. I see it in my students also, when I teach college students, and they have these deep pockets of knowledge into like various, something they're interested in. They know so much that when I was 20, I would not even, like things like, if someone's interested in Freudian theory, they'll know quite a lot about Freudian theory, and it's quite impressive at 20 to know that much. But, it's so these deep pockets of knowledge I notice. And I think that comes from the internet, because we're really interested in something. You can read more and more and more and get that knowledge to you. And for me, it's because you don't get this kind of generalized education that we used to have in our time, in that sense, that where everyone understood these certain things about, like, whatever, like the Green Revolution and this and that. You all understood these social things that happen, or the national movement, and now it's the way of information acquisition is kind of changing a bit, and because of the internet. And for me, that was an important thing to depict, like Nisha, like when she's struggling with her job, and she can go to YouTube and find like a way to alleviate her foot, because she works in the store, she has all this foot pain, so she can find out that's how we use the internet, in very like not transactional, but in very like I'm searching for the right word, but it's almost like an acquisitive way. Like, we want that knowledge, we'll go in and get it, and it has that to offer. And so this is how young people negotiate, work with the internet. This is how we do it also. So I thought it was an interesting thing I wanted to debate.
Right. There is a passage about Mayank's past, of course, and without revealing too much and giving any spoiler here. This sense of shame that he carries with him, and again, that is as a result of the misuse of technology in some way that we see happening today. And I would just like to read that out. You write that he sensed as well that this shame he carried inside did not lie that deep. Straight, it sat right beneath the surface of his skin, waiting like blood for the smallest opening to ooze out into the world, to show itself. Maybe this shame was in fact his most noticeable feature, the thing that people who knew him saw when they looked into his face. Maybe this wound had defined him, had become the very thing that people thought of when they thought of him. And these are little scars that people carry, the past that they have. And I wanted to understand that, from you, that and similar things are there, in the case of Nisha as well. And if you could talk a little bit about, when you were creating both these characters, and especially Mayank, because he is a part of that machinery of fake news. Were you sort of looking for such sort of connect somewhere that that could have a sort of bearing on the kind of person he eventually becomes?
That's a really good question. There was a passage that I was actually quite proud of. Thank you for noticing it. Thank you for picking it up. I do feel that is experience of shame. That's my experience of shame. And so, in many ways, I gave Mayank some of my own experiences. He's a very distant character for me in age, and in he's much younger than me, and religion, background, everything. But in terms of the emotional experiences he's gone through, or he's undergone, I did borrow from my own life in to some degree, and that my yeah, I mean, I felt that was, when you feel like this grievous kind of shame about whatever, like something you've done, something in family, something, and it's with you, and that you can't, it's part of you, it's not going anywhere, and you worry about how everyone else perceives you. These are that's what I mean by like those were my experiences about how I was being perceived, and how how visible it was. Basically, once you accept it, once it's part of you, then you worry about how visible it is. And I think that's what we do as writers. We give our characters. I've given Nisha so much of myself also. Just in terms of, oh, so much of my wife, so much of myself. It's not that I only give a male character my experience, because like you have to give it to everyone. Like it's just part of it, and I think that because yeah, and that's why like I'm glad that you noticed that it was a very difficult passage for me to write, that whole sequence in the metro and all of that. But I think it is like among the better sequences in the book. So thank you very much.
Also, Prayaag, I think for long, I think in these past 10 years, most of us, those who are interested in fiction, they have asked this question that how fiction writers are going to respond to this very moment. But when you, as a fiction writer, when you draw on something, on a material that is so urgent and so contemporary. I mean, when you do not have the luxury of distance, how does that process work when you are responding to a particular moment of time in the history of the nation, and then you're writing fiction?
Another very interesting question. It's very difficult. I would say it's difficult because you can talk to my agent or my editor. She's my agent and editor, or my I had my this is a very long novel actually. If you actually, I wrote 3 drafts over the years. Each was like 90,000 words, 100,000. The final novel is nothing close to that. And so I learned to bring in the parts that were real, and like I had, because at one time when I was writing, everyone was going on about the metaverse and all of that, and then like at one time I had Mayank working in the metaverse, like and it was like making crazy jumps, and I shouldn't reveal all this stuff because you're not like it's not important to what he is now, but like that's just the process of being a writer. Like like you make mistakes, you make these weird forays, you have to cut out stuff you're really fond of. Like at one time I had him playing this kind of prank on the like I swear I really want to use that sequence someday. Like I cut out one of what I think was a really good piece of writing, just because it didn't fit. It didn't fit the book. It didn't fit who he was now and how intelligent he was. In many ways, Mayank has became more intelligent with each draft, and more thinking and more caring individual with each draft. And until finally, I was happy with who he was. And it's it's a difficult thing to respond to how the world is moving, and if that is your intention, then you can't. It's impossible because there's so much stuff happening and there's so many things going on, and if you want to write this all-encompassing novel of the moment or novel of the last 10 years or something, you're done. Like you can't even, you probably won't even be able to start, or you just stay stuck or whatever, or maybe someone can do it but I can't. I think the more my idea honed down, the more I whittled away the missteps, and just took away the stuff that wasn't necessary, and just focused on Mayank and focused on Nisha, and tried to make their stories as true and authentic to them, like to their journeys. Like it can't be that he's suddenly like shooting off into some other like completely different, working with some Californian company. I don't know, like it is. So it has to be true to his opportunities, and it has to be true to his life and the depiction of his life. And so it was a learning process from this novel completely, and hopefully I can carry some of those lessons into the third.
Right. Just to conclude, Prayaag, related to this para that we mentioned, and when Mayank is thinking about his shame, he comes to the conclusion, and I think that's where you end the para, that perhaps it's all imaginary, that this damage, our past and future are both imagined in some sense, and we fabricate the very fabric of our lives. That's such a beautiful sentence. And I wanted to ask you, from the perspective of craft, but for this one, did you sort of have any sort of writer in mind from the perspective of craft again?
I read a lot over the last years. Like the last few years, I've just been reading almost incessantly. It's nice. Like it's nice to be able to teach and write and like read, and I've been reading a lot, and I read a lot of great writers. At one time, I was very inspired by the Czech dissidents. Like bohemian Rabal. Like, there's this guy who wrote this amazing novel called I Serve the King of England. It's one of the funniest. You should read it. It's really one of the funniest and best written novels I've ever read in my life. It's about this kind of World War II Czech. It's like post World War II, pre-communist revolution, and it's a very interesting time in Czech history. But it's a wild comic tale about a hotel bellboy and just doing insane things. And so Hrabal was, I think he called himself a poet of the, I guess we could call it the subalterns or whatever. Like he spent all his time like in, trying to understand how the common Czech person spoke and thought, and all of that. And I thought he did it very beautifully in that novel. He's done it. He's a great writer, and like, he's one of their great, like Kundera and like whoever, Rabat is right up there for the Czechs. And I just, I mean, he was one of the inspirations. I would say if there was one, and but my novel is completely different from his, and like it's not like I don't think anyone could pick that as an inspiration, because first of all, he's like a stylist, like he's a really elegant prose writer, and no one can write like him. A lot of people try to write like him, no one can write like him. So I don't know.
On that note, Prayaag, it was really, really lovely talking to you. Thank you so much for taking the time out.
The Federal and Relevant Hypermarket jointly present the Thoothukudi Marathon 2024 to raise awareness on drug abuse. The event is co-presented by Edison Cardio Care Center, Tiruchendur, powered by L. Anand Jewelry and Saint Mother Teresa Engineering College, Thoothukudi.